Leland Vittert, host of On Balance, right here for us on NewsNation, joining us this morning. And Leland, I got to talk about a couple of things because RFK says things that a lot of candidates would never say out loud, even if they did believe them. But he's extremely convinced that he's right about some things that people are, of course, at odds with. Then he has this rare voice condition, saying it's difficult for him to even hear himself, listen to himself speak. Do you think that his stance and his passion breaks through? I mean, I think about somebody like John Fetterman, who was able to break through and still get elected in spite of his health issues.
Yeah, I think that what we have to look at here is that the 14% or so right now that support Robert Kennedy do so not because they necessarily like the things that you just talked about, Adrienne, but in spite of them. And what was so important about last night's town hall, and I thought Elizabeth did a great job on this, is talking about things other than what you usually think of when you hear about Robert F. Kennedy, because the media and his opponents, and he has significant ones really on both sides of the aisle, have done a fabulous job defining and attacking RFK. Today, last night, he got a chance to define himself before a national audience, and now we wait and we see what happens with the poll numbers. He's gotten an enormous amount of exposure because of the videos over the weekend. Now, because of this town hall, the clips of this have gone all over the place. And what's interesting is I've talked to people, is the clips that everyone's talking about are not the ones about the typical things and the typical views that you hear when you think of Robert F. Kennedy, and what we've been told are the reasons that people just can't support him because he has these views on vaccines or whatever. The clips that are making the most impact right now are the ones where he says he's not going to rule out running as a third party and won't agree necessarily to endorse President Biden. That was a huge moment of news that Elizabeth got him to reveal, especially a third party possibility. And especially what that means in places like Georgia and Pennsylvania and Ohio. Yeah. And the second bit of news is about what he said about Donald Trump. And it's a very, very different message than what we're hearing from any other politician in the presidential race. It's extraordinary. That resonates with a lot of people. And I think those are the two things that as we look back on last night, if things really turn around for a change for Robert Kennedy in his presidential race, it's going to be those two moments that'll probably define last night.
Yeah, I think that we have to stop using the term outlier because outlier is completely redefined in this 2023 world that we live in. Kennedy's saying something that a lot of us say, which is we need more unity in America. Let's listen.
So I'm proud that President Trump likes me, even though I don't agree with him on most of his issues, because I don't want to alienate people. I want to bring people together.
Is he doing that? I think a lot of people are surprised he's doing so well, obviously. But is it enough that he is for unity? Is it enough that he's the anti-Biden candidate?
We're going to see. And what is interesting, and Robert Sherman's reporting really lays this out, as does some sound bites that Kelly Meyer has gotten in some interviews with voters in South Carolina. But if you think about the political spectrum, not as a line, but as a horseshoe, if you will, the populist and alt-populist, however you want to define those, of each party are a lot closer than people think. It's sort of at the bottom of the horseshoe, if you will. And what Kennedy is saying appeals to those people. RFK Jr. is saying, I'm not going to attack either side. But at the same time, he's not saying, I love both sides. He's saying, I disagree with them. I'm going to do things differently. And that's what people want to hear. They're now a group of people who believe that all the Republicans, including Donald Trump, have failed them in part of the establishment. And the same goes for Democrats. So now here is someone saying, I have views that sort of could match or partly could match either one of the populist movements on the left or the right. I'm here to talk. That's somebody who's going to get a certain amount of support.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.